Hello. Oops.
Good morning. How's things? You go. From Monday? Monday wasn't actually that bad. It was Monday. I'm still thinking about turning that around the long shot. And so I think that they understand the importance of rural sector. My next mission is to curb revenue, and it seems to be their mission of life to take on the rural sector along the coast and use it to get share. There's some conversation here, and they're talking about a review on the financial policy review, and comparing our UAGC. We need that UAGC, comparing our remittance, like the and remittance, gives me an indication to push towards. I'll give you an example. Have you understand that general policy down here, one uniform responsibility up there, because a farm is several, most farms are made up of number of no lots. In my case, it's about 21. That's just revenue getting from guaranteed money. With your level of confidence. With my level of confidence. We're better off not having the damn thing, for me, at least I can sit up there and hear what people are saying. As soon as it gets a magnification, I'll start drumming and just, like, those the noise they make on those science fiction movies of radios going. What are we about to increase the administration expenses? You do that with writing. No,
gentlemen, we will kick it off. Come to time. So welcome. I was just looking through the numbers here. It surprised me. We actually only don't have 2 councillors on this committee, so it is a large committee. Anyway, that's good because it's a very important area. I did send out an email, I hope everyone got it, just to show you that we're just changing the order slightly in the public excluded part of the agenda. Okay, so I never got a reaction against that, so I guess everyone's happy with it. Okay, declarations of interest. I would imagine there'd be any today. There are none. Okay. Apologies, so sorry I didn't call for that, but then everyone is here, so Karen Fenn sent me an apology, so even though she's not on the committee, maybe she was intending to come. But anyway, I guess we'll record that. We're happy to accept that. I'll move it. Councillor Stolt, second. No, we don't. Okay, right. We don't need to do that. Okay, we move to the minutes then. Okay. Councillor Burdett's moving. Councillor McLean seconding. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Any discussion of those minutes?
I have, Mr. Chairman, 2 questions.
Sure.
But I see Fiona not here, so maybe we're a bit hamstrung. We go to page 8, item 10.2. As freehold land leases do not meet legislative requirements, council policy was applied. And my question, Mr. Chairman, would have been to Fiona, does that mean to tell me that the 2 Maparo leases are illegitimate?
Well, okay, well, have you got?
I can't.
You can't answer that, but we'll record that question and we'll have it for you. Okay.
One down here, ownership for 10 years leases must be recorded on the certificate of title. However, most rural properties do not have 10-year leases. Well, the question is, where in council policy or government policy does it state that?
Yeah, we have got it in our policy because I remember seeing that when we were looking into some issues. But it is in our policy. It does mention it. It does mention 10 years. That's a requirement for, you're talking about having a remission.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as explained before, we are going to review all those policies, yes, and that'll give you an opportunity to bring your, yeah, okay. Okay, any other matters in those minutes? We'll go to the action sheet. It appears to me there's a lot coming up in the next meeting. Yeah, October, September, October. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure. Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. We haven't got the amalgamation on the action sheet, but it'd be good to have updates on if that's progressing well, the Heart of Gisborne amalgamation. Just because I think they were well ahead of our schedule in terms of the extension we gave them for negotiation.
That's right.
But so I think they were due towards the end of this month to have it completed anyway. So it'd be good to get an update on that when it occurs.
Okay, so we'll have that recorded and an update for you. Any other matters? So there's the governance work plan. And Councillor Dowsing, you'd like some discussion on that?
No, sorry. Just one other thing for the action sheet is there has been, it appears, some delays down at the Inner Harbour project for stage 1 of navigations, and we haven't had an update on the financial ramifications of that, if there's any overspend in stage 1 of the Inner Harbour, so to get an update on that as well.
Okay, yep, it's great. So, work plan, any comments around that? Councillor Thompson.
Just a question on process with the rates
review, it was actually a decision of councils to set up a separate group, and that was this committee to do the roading, to look at the roading in specific. And so I've just had a quick look. I might have missed it before, but do you think we should have that written into the plan as a specific action plan?
How about we leave that to the discussion around the rollout of reviewing all our finance and revenue policies? Yeah, because that's part of that, and we really need to integrate it. Yeah, I have some concerns too that that was a few years ago now, and the industry has been waiting for us to have that discussion, and we still have got that offer on the table that they will be part of those discussions. So shall we discuss that, and then we can just, talk about the whole rollout of reviewing these things.
Obviously, I'd be keen to put it at the front, because the rest of the discussion is to remedy or create a plan for the 3-year term that is applied at the end of the 3rd year. This one, we've actually spoke about having something available at the end of for the next annual plan, and that was one of the conclude. Well, we were told that would be how we would approach it. That for the next annual plan, we would have something ready for the roading, because, as you said, it's been going on for so long. And so, really, I'm sort of thinking that in our discussion, we should look at that as a separate one up front and fast track it.
Yeah, Pauline.
Just with that, that is the first one off the rank when we're looking at the activities. And to get it into the annual plan, you would have to have that ready to model by December, January. And what we're doing alongside this, we're getting research over the roading application, what is the uses, what is likely to be the uses in the future. Alongside that, we're trying to get what are the actual costs, rural versus urban, different areas. But that is going to take at least this is our collection stage of research, to about January, February. So I don't see, even if we had fast track, you wouldn't have all of that information to be able to do that for this annual plan. And the only other thing that I can say with that, if you change one without seeing the movements with the other rating impacts, if you have an overarching review of your principles, you change huge incidence of rates. So those kind of things, they do need to be looked holistically before you go through. But that is the first one, as the independent, that information is being gathered now. So you can have a comprehensive review behind it.
So, Councillor Thompson, look, I understand your concerns that this is taking a long time, but without integrating it with all the rest, as Pauline has said, well, it means that you might have to then alter it again later. So it's better to have an integrated look at it. Councillor Seymour.
Can I start through you, Mr. Chairman? Did I hear it said that we wouldn't have this information to put into the next annual plan? And we've asked for it before the last one? I think that's what we did do.
All the review that we actually said that we would start it in year one, that we would start this for the comprehensive review with the first one going off with the roading. It wasn't in the original program to do that rate, and if it was significant changes with it, you would have to see what the other implications of the rest of the review. So effectively, in order to get that and the information of some of that research is coming through now, it's not available to about December, January, and then you've got to do the modelling afterwards with what that occurs. Otherwise, it could be contested if you haven't got the robust information associated with it.
Mr. Chairman, that is disappointing though, We had been asking to do this roading review, and we did ask for it, recognising that we couldn't have the data. We started asking for it 3-4 months before 30 June, and we knew we couldn't have it to be allowed into the 10-year plan that we were developing up. And now we're hearing that we still won't have it for potentially year one of the next annual plan. I just think it is disappointing that this is very significant expenditure for this district council.
Okay, all I can say is I agree with you. It's disappointing we can't move it quicker, but it makes no sense to move one item in amongst the rating policies and then find that it has unintended consequences, or you have to adjust everything else later. When you...
I'm not arguing about that. I'm just arguing about the slippage.
Disappointment. Okay, so we agree with that.
The opportunity to have this information. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Okay, we will now leave of absence. No, haven't heard any acknowledgements and tributes. Haven't got any public input. No extraordinary business. No notice of motion. No adjourned business. No. And get to reports, and on page 17 we're up to.
It's just your normal treasury. There's no real normal departures from our progress. It is saying that the previous month it was 53.7 million, but that was a cash flow at the end of the financial year with the expenditure going on, and there was about a 5 million short-term debt raise, but we've since paid it back. So at the moment that's just saying we're at 47.9, but effectively we're tracking for our policies.
Councillor Cranston?
Yeah, thank you. I just don't fully understand the borrow notes. If you could explain to us, and more particularly how it can be used to offset the debt balances.
That's an asset. So what they actually say that the net, it doesn't, technically one's a liability and the other one is associated with it. In order to become a member of the LGFA, we actually have to buy borrow notes, or it's termed an asset. So we're saying that the net obligation to LGFA, if you take those two off, is recorded as that. But effectively, we always state what the amounts are separately.
But they're not a facility as such?
No, they're not a facility, they're actually an asset. So this is our obligation, to LGFA. So if we had to pay them out tomorrow, we had everything, we could say, okay, we can offset, sell off that asset to them, that reduces the overall debt. Just like if you had in your bank account and you had some cash in there, you'd offset some of the other things that you own to the rest of the bank account of long term.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 32, and I'm not sure that we're on the same numbering with our
32 or
32.
22.
We're on the Treasury report one.
Sorry.
You'll move receive the report. Councillor Dowsing, second Councillor Arkada-Brown. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Right, we're on to that report. No, we're not. Page 32, we're still not there, Councillor Thompson. You're getting a bit ahead of us. We're on page 23 now. Financial report.
So obviously this is just where we're at 2 months into the financial year. At the moment it's a timing issue of most of the surplus recognised of income. As some of those, as we go throughout the year, some of the grant income will be used up, or especially with the emergency works. But effectively, that's where our position is, which is saying is 1.6 million is a favourable difference in what we had on the plan. As in part of the discussion, it talks about the emergency works, where the emergency works, which was the event of June 2018, the assessment of that came after the adoption of the LTP, which means the progress that we do the works in this financial year will be recorded as a variance, either as more expenditure, but then we should see a corresponding more income. So the net effect to the council is nil, but there will be some variances as we see that's already starting to occur in this part of the year. The only other things is to have note, the capital expenditure is 3.3 against 3 million. And just if you reference those, how you can actually see a little bit more on page 29 of the report, there is a bottom paragraph which explains the capital expenditure, what the difference is and where it occurred. And then if you turn over on page 30, it is the graphs which are saying where, what we've done and what it compares to what we had first initial phase. So if you look in the first graph, July, where it says, in that particular one, we noted that we're slightly behind in the roading. The green is what we had phased to come into it, and the blue is the actuals. But in this month, the roading has come back and they've managed to get back on and a little bit ahead of the year-to-date program. So that's where we've got the 3.3. And the graph 2 just shows you the cumulative effect. That's just the month effect, what was occurred. And then the next graph below that, where it just says, okay, where are we tracking with it? First 2 months in, it's saying that there is no major departures with the variances with it.
Okay, Councillor Seymour.
Thank you. I'm just going to express concern about the delay in the wastewater project. I do think we need to make sure that that pressure is kept on all of those projects with a capital spend beside them. On page 29 and 14, we're expecting 38% of the capital program to occur within the first 6 months. 38% is not much. And I know then you come to summer and the summer holidays and there's a gap. And so I do think that we need to urge management to keep a close eye on the, thank you, Councillor Foster, a close eye on those renewals and keep those things moving along, because that's what the public like to see.
Robert.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the things I've spoken about before is the necessity of the operation of the council to stay within budget. I note that we're going to be getting a more comprehensive report after the end of the first quarter. Well, we're actually into the second quarter now, and I know it's not easy. I'm just wondering when some more detailed figures will be available so that we can assess trends.
So for the chair, so the 30th of September, 5 working days thereafter, that occurs, 5 plus 2, 7, you're talking 7 working days, which is basically now. So we couldn't report at this report with those kind of the details. So with the timing of our meetings, we try to get those reports to coincide, and sometimes they don't. So while we give the updates of the monthly, and unfortunately the next finance and audit is at the end of November. So what we will do at future Tarafti, we will have the September, but it won't be in the fullest report of where we normally have it on quarterly. And effectively the other notes and things that you actually have are around mostly the loan funding or some of the reserves. And because of the capital program, as you can see, is only 3.3, that isn't a significant departure of where you are in the first quarter. So, but we will be getting that information on the next one, finance and audit, which unfortunately the timing of it is at the end of November.
Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a little bit around the current budget for this year, and I don't know how much detail I've really seen it in prior to, well, I haven't seen it in great detail, I don't think. My question is around the employee benefit expenses. And I know that historically it's looked like we've probably under budgeted for employee benefits. I know that last year we were significantly over budget. Turns out last year it was around 19 million, but this year we seem to have budgeted for an additional 1.6 million on top of last year. So it's actually, we've increased the employee benefits in part of the budget by approximately 3 point something million since last year's budget. Well, last year's budget, if we were $1.5 million short or so, and we spent 19 million total, I would assume that our budget was 17.5 million, and now we're at 20.6 million.
So last year, if you saw the variances, and it had been tracking from year 1, year 2, year 3 of the long-term plan, there were about $1 million variances with the employee costs against the budgets. And last year, as we said at the end of last financial year, that we would be seeing about a 1.3 million variance of our employee costs against what was the plan, and that was a function of how we set the long-term plan. We set the long-term plan in 2014, and at that particular time, it was based on that information going through, and there wasn't, while we have an annual plan, some adjustments, we didn't change major changes with it. And as soon as that was adopted, the 30th of June that year, there were changes to the way that we brought things in-house as opposed to have contractors. So it was signalled last year, and you can see in the annual report that we've been signalling all the way along that there was 1.3 million. This is just the same effect if you add, say, the operating costs and the expenditure is that same alignment, but instead of actually being in contractors' costs and employee expenses, it's now been recognising that the function that we do in-house.
So what was last year's employee benefit expenses budget?
I can't tell you off the top of my head, but it was definitely a 1.3 million difference to what I can come back to you on exactly what it is.
So approximately 17.7, which is 1.3 less than what we spent, which was 19 million, approximately, somewhere around there.
Nadine? We'll come over here. Yeah, and we're all the actioners.
Through the chair, I think we've discussed the employee salaries line for some time now leading up to resetting the long-term plan. I've presented you with the information about that. I'm just trying to understand what the purpose of the question is in terms of, is there a concern around our current employee expenditure, or are you relitigating the LTP process?
No, it's a fairly simple question. It's what last year's budget was for the expenditure. I'm trying to understand.
Oh, we can look that up on the internet for you right now if that's what you want, and come back to the table.
So I'm just trying to understand what the level of increase is prior to last year's budget, and so what the overall adjustment looks like in this year's budget. Is it a $3 million increase in that portion of the budget? Which it seems like it would be from the figures that you're saying, but I don't know what last year's budget was because I don't have it in front of me. So that's all I want to know, is what was last year's budget.
Sure.
So, okay, the answer will be brought to you later. Councillor Thompson.
Always seem so.
We're still not on page 32.
We don't need people to do all my work for me. That makes me feel like. Anyhow, hey, on page 32, it tells how we spend about 70% of our capital budget every year for the last 5 years. So that means. No, it's not. It's the same. It's not.
Page 29.
That's all right. You'll get your. I've got you really marked down as first off the rank when it comes to that.
Yeah, no, you're right. I'm just. It was actually stuck together.
That's all right, Councillor Thompson. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments, Councillor Foster?
Just got a question on page 25, number 11. Until 100% of external funding is paid, the local share will be bankrolled by council. The timing of the receiving of the hired subsidies is still to be confirmed, and indicated the Transport Agency could be paying by October or November. The question is it being paid yet, and how much is the bankrolling going to cost us?
For the chair, it's a difference of the far rate of what we would get. So it's about 32% of, I think it's about on for a month. So 32%, say if it's $1 million that we've got shortfall or whatever, that's the cost for a month of, you know, an interest cost that we will be doing. However, against that, NZTA are looking at some way of addressing some of the emergency expenditure that occurred in the last financial year and getting a higher rate. So I'm hoping that any interest costs that we may have incurred by front reporting this is captured by there.
So, okay.
Yeah,
Great.
Councillor Seymour.
But supplementary to that, and maybe Mr. Wilson can help us with this. At the end of the day, NZTA is the Crown funder for roading. We don't go away and do something that isn't allowed for and we haven't reached agreement with them over. So how can we ensure that they make their payments as in an anticipated and managed way? Because if they're doing it to us, then I guess they're doing it to a number of other local authorities. And our budgets are far less than theirs. So can we hear what mechanism there is in place to get NZTA up to speed?
David, have you got an answer there?
Yes, I have a microphone. So through the chair, we've been working with the agency. I met with them on Monday when I was in Wellington to discuss when our payments are coming through. The delay is because NZTA is funding part of our increases and the Provincial Growth Fund is paying part of the other share. So for the emergency works, for example, NZTA have already increased their share to 92 cents in the dollar for the work we have. It's the 8 cents in the dollar that we're trying to get from the Provincial Growth Funds, who are waiting for those payments to happen in Wellington before they will hit our accounts. We've absolutely, as you say, Councillor Seymour, we're going ahead with the work. We've got it all underway. We're waiting for some backroom movement of money down in Wellington to then be able to hit our accounts up here.
So just for a point of clarity, thanks very much for that. It should actually say that the PGF money is not available rather than the NZTA money. Or does it go through from the PGF to NZTA to us?
So through the chair, the money will come through the TO system and NZTA. So the money has to move from MB to NZTA and then it comes to us. So we're waiting on that and then we'll be able to draw it down in TO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Thompson?
Yeah.
Not page 32.
We have to talk about page 28. 04. The variance of the annual plan is due to collecting more rates than planned as a result of increased capital value in a number of UAGCs. Now, can you just explain the mechanism by how we can go into a annual plan? We sort it all out. We have an established capital value base, but because there's more capital value, my thoughts in the back of my mind are saying that it actually is a balancing thing. You know, capital. We aim at a target. If someone's got high capital value, they pay a bit more, others pay a bit less. I'm just not quite sure the mechanism that allows us to collect more rates than planned as a result of increasing capital. And also for the number of UAGCs, do we not establish the number of UAGCs annually? And does it apply? Can you actually, a new UAGC, can that take effect during a tax year? Is that what's causing that? I'm not quite sure.
I'll just I'll just speak it, and if I got it wrong, Fiona can actually clarify it. So when we set the rates and we do the planned what we need to take, we have it on the rating database of what we've actually got, the number of separately soups at that time. When it comes closer to actually raising the rates, we actually make sure that we check on the database. So during that time, which is February, we look at that and then see when it comes to close to the end of the and raising it, it is about June. And in that particular case, there are some new developments, and so, or the subdivisions, and so there is actually an increase in the number than what we actually had in the plan. So by way of our policy, it is actually a little bit more than what the original was planned.
Just a supplementary, don't we have a mechanism in our system that then balances that out against the, because that's the sort of thing that would put us over the cap. You know, if we're close to the cap and we end up with a whole lot more UAUCs, that's the sort of what would put us over. Don't we have a system where that would balance back into something else? And the same with valuation. I'm not, you know, it just seems like we to make a statement that we're collecting more rates than planned it just doesn't sound right, you know.
Through the chair. So the cap comes into account when you plan with what the rates are. You must be underneath that cap when you plan it. When the final part comes into account, that's assessed at that particular point. So we're not breaching any of the 30%. It's what you planned, you must be under it there. If at that actual time there you find that you've got more growth factors in your rating database, well then you collect more on those things. We try to balance it so they match each other. That's the ideal. So you have very much of a margin, not under, but not over, based on that planned assessment. But that's the application that occurs every year.
Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. Yes, I found the information I was looking for now. So last year's budget for the employee benefit expenses was 17.737 million. This year is 20.673 million. That indicates a 16.5% increase in employee benefit expenses. What I'd like to ask is if we can have a report on the increase over the last, say, 5 to 7 years, so I can see incremental increase and see how that has grown in our organisation. It's just so I can understand the growth of that area of our business.
Through the chair, I have provided that information to you all before, but I'm happy to bring back that information again. I provided it to you for the last 3 years. It demonstrated that consistently on year we were overspent because that budget never was set at the right level. It stayed static for that time. So happy to circulate that paper. You've had it probably about 3 times now. That's fine. I'm happy that it was set at the incorrect level and that adjustments are made. I'm not questioning that. We've discussed previously the quantity of staff quite regularly. I don't remember seeing the figures on annual increases, that's all. I'll circulate that document.
But I mean to really get a handle on how all that's working out is as was said, that a lot of those costs have been transferred in-house, and it just seems that you'd need to see some of the other side of the equation and see what other costs have actually been transferred from contractors into in-house. And by looking at both of those things, you would judge how well we've been performing. Would you not? If that's possible. I mean, it would be quite difficult to extract exactly what contractors that you would have been employing in-house, but at least a bit of a high-level view of how that's worked out.
Yeah, certainly. And as I said, we have provided that information several times in our earlier meetings, and I've also talked through it. So the information is there.
Okay, so people want to look at it again, by the sounds of it. Okay, any other matters there? Move Councillor Seymour, second Councillor Stoltz. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Okay, we're on to page 31, and Councillor Thompson, you're first in. No, I'm going to allow him to actually say something first.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, it's got a discussion here with, on page 32 with trends, and we talk about the over the last 5 years, council on average has spent 70% of its total capital budget, and that's could be seen either way as a concern or a. But what I'd like to know is over 5 years, that's 30% saved every time. So 5, 3 is 50. That's 150% of the capital budget of 1 year's capital budget somewhere. And so what happens to that, because we rate for that money, we collect it. And now does it go into every year? Does it sort of roll into, does that balance up and go into the next year? Or how do we account for the fact that we've rated for it, collected it, and
it's been spent on what it was rated for?
Yeah, and not only that, you know, like, where is it? Because you might think, okay, then it's gone into a fund which could be keeping our debt below forecast or something like that, so that when we need it, it's still there. Or
okay, so I'll get Pauline and you can do your initial spiel as well, okay?
So the capital expenditure, where it occurs, the program of that is, the other side of that is where you need to raise loans to fund that particular capital project. If you don't do the project, you don't need to raise capital, you don't need to raise your debt. So your debt is your other side of that. And the debt where the ratepayers impact is the year following when you do the capital funds. And so if you've done a particular project in that first year, at the end of that, there may be interest costs associated. That's when you raise the operational costs with it. So if you don't do the work, technically you wouldn't rate for those particular aspects. It's only that where you see it is in your either decreasing expected level of debt. Does that answer?
Yeah, can I just have something interesting? Then that we would expect that debt level to be 150% of annual capital higher than what it was had we been on target with our capital every year. Now, how do we, when we're doing the annual plan or the 10-year plan or the 3-year plan, we have this debt forecast. And so, and I know we're tracking around about right with that at the moment. It's not showing like there's a huge saving somewhere. So what's happening, or is that, are we showing that debt, that savings on not having to borrow that debt? Are we showing that savings on debt way lower than what it should be because of it?
So some of the things I was going to say that the challenges that councils have is one of them is that when you do the long-term plan, you make certain assumptions of how things are going to be funded. And to do that capital programs, you make an assumption that you're going to get external revenue. So for where we say in a lot of our cases where, say for argument, let's take the previous years where we said we're going to do the pool, and that was 100% external funding. Well, that would equate for, say, 10% of that 30% that we didn't do, but we actually didn't get any money aside with it. So we wouldn't see any decrease in our debt. It's because that was going to be funded from elsewhere. So a lot of the fact that our external capital program is when we're going to get that external funding. And so for argument's sake, in this year's program, there was the walkway. Well, the walkway, the funds were going to be provided not in this particular year, but in the next year. So we're not doing that 1.5 million worth of that work. So therefore we don't have the expenditure because we didn't have the income. So it's not necessarily one-to-one priority because you just didn't spend that amount of capital expenditure. You also didn't have the revenue inside as well. Just a couple of things with it. Can I just say a sort of a background to some of that may or may not be answered in some of your queries? Yeah. Just where we sit, this long-term plan, it comes from the basis of December 2014. And so you set and councils have to set their long-term plan based on that particular point of that best information that they have available. And I think that's is one of the challenges that councils do have. And maybe it's either councils don't do their jobs well to 100%, or in actual fact, they're all facing similar problems. and that they have to do that for 10 years, but then find, say, where we are at year 3, that some of the conditions of the assets that we had initially bought in 2014 is better than what we expected, or alternatively, and they can be delayed a little bit longer, where there may be other assets that come into streams wherever natural disasters or whatever occurs that we have to prioritise. So some of that's the balancing that we actually have because it's the nature of it. We do get a chance to revisit any of that in an annual plan year and adjust things, but fundamentally material differences is usually just looking at what we actually have and adjusting that within the course of the things. And this is what, and you probably got it, that this is what this paper is trying to address. It's trying to address how well we're doing things against the forecast. That is one fundamental. But the other second part of it is trying to assess it, the same thing as what the Office of the Auditor General is saying, is how you apply your capital expenditure. And an audit risk is probably one of the things that you need to be aware of, is saying, okay, what is our renewals, what are the percentages, what is the growth, and where that occurs, and how are we doing that over the life of the asset. So I think most of that, or if there's other things within the report that isn't the plan, I can just answer that as well.
Councillor Seymour. Or are you carrying on with the same thing? Well, yeah, okay, you finish off then.
Yes, that raises the point and confirms the previous comment with regard to getting on with that capital expenditure and reference and just shortly about the wastewater. And it's something we're really going to have to watch, and something we're really going to have to sort of get our heads around, because especially with this GPF that we have, which means that there's going to be a large capital spend coming up, and if we've just got to get our heads around how we're going to get it done, because it's one of those things that you can't just have that money sitting out there and not get the job done. It's got to be done. So I think we really need to, again, signal that we need to put some effort into making sure that we get on top of that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And one other quick one, and page 35. Just a query. And I'm on our loss and profit against annual plans, actuals, and APs here, and we've had over the years we have different financial officers who interpret it differently, and they bracket different things. They either bracket a loss or bracket a profit, and there hasn't been a lot of consistency here over the years. And now, as far as I see, this is pretty right, but on the third line down on page 35, you've got Tairāwhiti roads. It shows a less expenditure than actual, and it's bracketed. Is that right or wrong? It's wrong. Okay.
Okay, Councillor Seymour.
So all the brackets are wrong?
No,
just that one.
Just that one.
Right. I'll just go back to the explanation around capital and what we rate for. Now, most of us know we don't rate for capital because we borrow that from whatever source or it's grant funded. But we do have to remember we do rate for the interest on those lines. And so we are actually rating our ratepayers for the interest. And if year on year we're only spending 70% of capital that we estimate, and we have at least collected interest for 100% of the dollar value that we thought we were going to borrow. Not necessarily the total project cost, because some of it is grant funded. So that's correct, isn't it?
50% we take out because we do, but you're right, there's some interest components that comes at the end, but not 100% because of the timing of when we do the projects, it's usually towards the end of the year, so we sort of average.
I'm not turned on, sorry. Right, my question really, well, it's a point of clarification on page 36, and it relates to the Lawson Field reconstruction. And I just think it would be a bit more transparent if all of the funds that have been secured by council show in there, because if you just read the script at item 17, you could be led to believe that there's still a large amount of money to be raised for that project, because all it says in there is that council has committed 1.1 and the War Memorial Theatre Trust have successfully obtained 1 mil. Well, if you think back, the council obtained 350,000 from lotteries. They obtained 417,000 from regional culture and heritage. And recently, the trust, along with the council, made an application for ECCT, which secured 200,000, and that went directly into council's coffers. So, because that's the accountability on ECCT. So there is quite a lot more money that council has obtained to that project. Plus there is a report going to the full council meeting at the end of the month of the annual report and balance sheets for the War Memorial Theatre Trust for the year. But I just think that it would be more transparent if all of the money that the council has obtained was shown in that paragraph rather than it looking like there's a huge gap in the project and there's not.
Councillor Carter-Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just intrigued, really, in regards to page 37, unplanned projects. I just wonder how much movement happens in that space. When I look at something like Te Puia Service Centre, it's titled as an unplanned project, but do they move into a space where they become planned? But just how well do we manage a whole set of capital spend in unplanned spaces? Like, is that there much movement? Because it sounds, in my view, bad to have unplanned, but I guess there are reasons why they termed that.
Through the chair, yeah, termed unplanned. It's just that it didn't meet the deadline when the annual plan was being submitted. Decisions came after that time through whatever circumstances, and so it was deemed that approval to go ahead with it, but it actually wasn't recorded in the annual plan at that particular point in time. And most of the times we reprioritise or we look at what are the fundings that we have available for it.
Supplementary to that question, which was really valid, because the Te Puia Service Centre is under the holding company. So what did GDC spend 25,000 on when it was a holding company?
Oh, Porticom office. The Porticom that was put in there, so that was ours. It's not part of the lease.
Right, thank you. I don't think it was.
Mostly here. Mostly the outfit of additional leasehold improvements that we requested subsequent to moving in.
Councillor Stolz.
My question was similar to that, just because we don't own this building, I assumed any reconfiguration. I know we asked for it, so I can understand that, but security changes, should that not be something that the owner of this building do?
So, through the chair, we have as leasehold improvements, so we recognise that as part of the things that anything that we have that is separate and we've agreed upon, we can put it as a leasehold improvement.
Nadine, did you want to say
something? And just through the chair, there's going to be about another $150 million worth of capital unplanned work that will show up at some point when that comes onto the box as a result of the external grant funding, and this stuff gets reset anyway through the annual plan process. So it's the stuff that has come into this financial year that, as Pauline said, hasn't been captured through that long-term plan process. But you're likely to see a lot more of this stuff given all this funding that's out there for us.
Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. I just actually wanted to touch on that Aotearoa as well, because my understanding is that the security changes are for a large amount for the CCTV, which was an exclusion from the contract, something that council always knew we had to provide. But also we've had an email from the chief executive stating that the estimated cost of the IT fit out, this was on December the 17th we received this, was $490,000. Which was unplanned expenditure, and I don't see that figure appearing in this report.
And some of the things that, if it did come in, it would be under IT. So you see a bulk of IT renewals and expenditure. So if some of it is across it, but most of it, yeah.
It was across IT. It was identified that it would be across IT, but there was a section in this report for money that had been reallocated. Is that not correct? That I would have expected to see it under. And is this not discussing last financial year, or is that this discussing this financial year? 2017-18. Would this IT fit out have not been done in last financial year?
I think the majority of it would have been, but there may have been something that they did prior to coming over here, which some of the costs could have just been within this building. I can actually get that for you, put it as the action note and reply to in that.
We'll get an answer for that.
Yeah. I'd just be surprised that if this equipment that was installed last December or whenever was in this financial year, not last financial year.
Okay, we'll find out where it is. Robert?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman, just the unbudgeted capital expenditure. I'm just wondering what the audit controls and the authorisation on these types of things are. Do they go through senior management, or are they brought to one of our committees? For example, there's been over $500,000 of unbudgeted expenditure on parks and open spaces. Who authorises that, and what are the controls around that?
For the Chair, all of those expenditure has come to a committee to have approval. If it's over a certain amount, we have delegated authorities. Anything that is unplanned over 100K, then this comes to council and they come for approval. Most of those things that you were talking about in the open spaces was associated with getting external funding for the toilets that were up the coast. So there are papers that always go to council with it.
Councillor Seymour?
There's just one other point, which I actually think might be the wrong way around. It's page 36 on Suburban Township upgrade, and it's the 2017-18 budget for Tookamara Bay. It's saying it was brought forward into 16-17. Well, actually, it was backed up, I would suggest, because in actual fact, it was to happen 1 year, and it took longer in consultation. Happened in the summer of 16-17. So it certainly wasn't the 17-18 budget, because by that stage, we were well on the way of planning, I believe, the next 2 township upgrades. So I just think that's maybe belongs to another township, not Tookamara Bay, because that was it was planned for over 5 years directly for 15-16, ended up happening in 16-17, and certainly wasn't for 17. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Councillor Dowsing.
Sorry, yes, I only made my comment on Awarua. I didn't actually get to ask any other questions.
Oh.
You moved on to Robert before I could, unfortunately. But I wanted to ask, actually, the big outlier in here, and as pointed out by Councillor Thompson, is the Drainwise project. And it's the previous 2 years that we've sat around this table, we've not made any progress on delivering on our desired amount of that project annually. What is I want to ask what the change in delivery strategy is for that project, because obviously the current one hasn't worked for the last 2 years. So do we have a new strategy? Or is it just a reprioritisation?
Well, as far as I know, there is a new strategy. David, you can give us a bit more information on that one.
Through the Chair, we have a presentation at Assets and Infrastructure this afternoon where we are outlining the process that we have for Drainwise. We have started the designs, we've started some of the work for it already. As the Assets and Infrastructure Committee Council were made aware last year of the delays on certain aspects of Drainwise, that we weren't able to do those projects. So we have a presentation this afternoon, and we're meeting again with industry tonight to outlay the work program that we have in front of us as well.
Thank you. I'll read that report. Cheers.
Okay, I'm sure we'll listen to that with interest. Okay, I'll move to receive the report. Councillor Seymour seconding. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Sorry? Jumped the gun. Oh, well, you can ask me later. Okay, we're on to the closed audit report. And we've got a copy of that.
And unfortunately, Dave Borrow's not here yet. I just have to...
oh, well, we'll catch him later when he comes. Has anyone got anything they want to say at this stage about it, or save until he comes? I've got a couple of questions for him. Pardon? Well, it's on later anyhow. Coffee? Okay. I think we could do that. Okay, we'll break for morning tea. we've heard that David Borrie, the auditor, has landed. He will be here soon, but we'll wait until he gets here. So with the committee's permission, we'll go on to item 10.5, Revenue and Financing Policy Review.
So I'll just give it a little bit of the background of that. We did signal in the long-term plan that we will be doing a comprehensive review of the revenue and financing. And while we have got a sort of a bit of a roadmap detailed on page 48, early next year we'll give you a more in detail of what is occurring when the workshops and things are planned for. So currently we're in the process of collection of information and research stage. And that includes check with our rates database, getting as much information and separating it into as much detail as we can in the future, and slicing and dicing. So it will enable us to be able to give information quickly and accurately on if you was rural versus urban, residential, that type, whereas before it was on types of percentages. Why we also are doing that, we will overlay that with Statistics New Zealand, which will have a database. They'll come over and provide what is the income in those per rating block, and then they'll be itemised on a sort of a smaller data set, or 50 mesh box. So the information will be quite granular, and we can be able to come back to you that. And that's in the process of getting the information ready for the statistics, which is due for, I would say, November, December, that the report comes back, and then we give you that in the new year of what the results of that was. Effectively, that's what's trying to say, identify the issue of affordability. And what we normally say affordability is, we define that as our total rates collected divided by the total number of rating units. And in giving us an average for the long-term plan in year one, that was about 3K inclusive GST. We compare that, when we usually do it, benchmark it against the other unitary authorities, which was Marlborough, Nelson and Tasman. And you had that sort of a financial wellbeing and audit review from PwC in October 2017. It showed that we were below that benchmarks, but that's how we usually define it, against the whole total rating base. So this is designed to actually give you that information. So if we say that we are affordable, if we continue with our same strategy, does that create any unexpected imbalances that what didn't intend to happen if it's applied for the next 10, 15 years? And so it's to give you that information as part of that background review. And interestingly, it becoming a reasonably high topic of interest, and we see that with the Solgum conference that's occurring in October this year. One of their main topics is, are you affordable? Are your rates affordable? And similarly from that, there was a case study just recently from Kapiti District Council, where they reviewed their affordability on the same similar things, going back to low data sets within their whole districts and the mesh blocks, and saying, where are the pockets, or are there pockets that we didn't expect to happen? And Pararua and things like areas that they identified that there were, the rates to revenue was actually quite high in certain areas. So that's the kind of the information we're trying to get to you first as part of that. There is other information that is going on at the same time as collecting the roads and the impacts and studies across that is there, but we will also trying to get our information which is more been asked before, what do we spend on our rural roads and what is the actuals versus the urban, and giving that information. So we're in the stage of collecting that information to be able to start this process off. But
yeah, Fiona, have you got anything to add at this time?
Just that I think it's quite a good thing to do an affordability study. We're also going to look at how we distribute our rate remissions compared to other councils around the country. And I think that will be quite interesting because I think we've only got about 3 people on our extreme hardship policy, and Kapiti, as an example, have got 300. So we are thinking that maybe we need to rebalance some of the way some of the remissions are done and look at that. So I think this affordability study is going to be really important and a good tool to have. It's also going to help us feed into our debt strategy and how we recover our debt and the type of techniques that we use to collect the debt and how we assist our community to work through paying rates. So, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that, the affordability report, because it's something we requested some time ago and know that it fits perfectly with this. I wanted to know on the principles of how we're going to undertake this. Are we going to sort of go from the ground up and look at what our driving principles behind how we structure our rates are, or are you going to look at the existing model and tear it down? What's the concept for the workshop?
Principles first, isn't it?
Yes, so we get the background information, you look at your overarching principles, are they still what you believe is relevant? Do you have any other that as a trump card, or are they all the same? So yes, the principles first.
Great, that's why I read it, that's why I understood it, but I wanted to make sure. The other thing, and it's a little bit off topic, but mayor and councillor representation costs quite large. Can you tell me what's categorised under that? It's it makes up 16.2% of our UAGC, and obviously it's not our salaries that are that big. So I just wanted to know what else is captured under there. So it comes up at about 2.8 million a year, right? So for a triennium,
as an action point, I can put commentary under action point of what it is.
Yeah, something in the future to understand that, because obviously our salaries are a fraction of that versus the rest. So I'd like to
there's quite a few other areas that come into that. It may not be logical. It seems it's under that, but it's not just mayor and council costs.
I guess that's my point. Is if there's things that are illogical under there, we break out the UAGC into several categories. Litter bins and cleaning of public areas is separate from public toilets, for example. They could essentially fall within one category, but if we've got things lumped in with mayor and councillor representation costs, I would wonder why, if they're not necessarily aligned. But it'd be just great to see it in the future.
Just with that, it would only be what that says. There's nothing lumped under that is another area. But what happens is, because you have overheads or cost of other things that support to give democracy and services. So in order to facilitate some of these meetings, the actual cost centre or activity might be charged from other areas in order to support and give you the information. So that's part of our overhead allocations within it, but I can give you a further breakdown of it.
Yeah, Councillor Burdett.
Pauline, I too noted the affordability thing, the principle of affordability is the heart of our strategy. What is affordable needs to be tested against the whole region. Given that we have now 10-year plan assessed that it's going to be a 5% increase across the board. That's a lot of money over 10 years. How do you intend to reconcile this if you're going to do a complete review?
So for the Cavity case study, what they did was they looked at some of their things within, they don't actually have a UAGC, but they have fixed charges. All right, so it's not applied by a capital value, they have fixed charges. And they had two rates that they had which fed into it. One was a roading rate of 8 million, and then there was community facilities open, which was sort of catch-all of 24 million. They looked at those two rates and they said, what if we did and we applied that based not on a fixed charge, but a capital value? And they said, what was the impacts of that and where the changes of the incidence occurs? Where does it release pressures in certain areas? And they mapped it and they showed it. And they found that they couldn't move on the 24. It was just too radical a change. So they looked at that one other type that was feeding into it, whether it's a UAGC or a fixed charge that's causing that imbalance. And they said, how can we actually moderate some of those unintended aspects? So you're right, you can't build from the ground up and change everything, but there may be certain things that we look at as part of the whole.
Thank you. Okay, any more discussion on that? So there's all work ahead. Councillor Dowsing moves and Councillor Forringham seconds. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against carry. So Dave's not here yet. Oh, well, we'll have to go on to Gisborne Holdings. Okay, well, I'm welcoming Gisborne Holdings down there. Would you like to come up to the table up here? Yeah, Rob, Tracy, Dave, and their new CFO, Sophie. So perhaps you'd like to introduce Sophie a bit more than me just mentioning her name, Rob. Oh, he's just come. Sorry? Yeah, yep. Morning. So just before I hand over to Robert, Pauline will just give a little bit of a talk first.
Just a couple of clarifications, and thanks to Tracy, she did point out there were a little bit of errors in some of the things that we have here. If you go to point 10 on point 10 on page 55, just want to clarify on this particular one. We have their financing costs were also up and aligned to the purchase of 9.5 assets. What that was referring to is on page 82 is under cash flows. So on that it says cash investing activities, which was applied to the purchase of fixed assets, which says it is 9.5. Technically, you could say that the fixed assets are 10 million, but we were saying that the applying of that financing funds was 9.5, so that was our reference point in there. On page 12, just a clarification, page 56 on note 12, it says 751k, but just want to make sure that it's understood that that gross profit is an increase of 751k favourably more than the previous year. So just clarification. Point 18, where it talks about shareholder and returns on investments, rather than the 3.9 it's there, it is probably an estimate of 4.1 because the change of taking out the revaluations needed to be adjusted on the equity side of it too. And the other last thing is a little bit of rounding issues. And for argument's sake, number point 11, at the bottom of that page it says 1.3. It was actually 1.27, but which would have equated to 1.23. 2 got missed out, and so it says 1.3. So number 11 on the bottom of the page. So instead of 1.2, saying 1.3. But that's just the clarifications on those.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, so Robert, would you like to introduce Sophie to the committee?
Yeah, Sophie's joined us. She's been working for Leader Brand up to now. We work with her for our finance team. So, yeah, been in Gisborne for 6 years. So she's only got another 12 to go before she classifies as a near local. But no, look, really pleased to have her on board and part of the transfer of the finance. Part of the transfer of the finance in-house is this has been part of it, and we welcome her aboard and we're really pleased to have it. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much. Now, would you like to speak to your financial results? Or you're just going to take questions?
I think we'll just take questions. It was, you know, it's presenting it at our AGM as we will. Yeah, but if there's any questions people have got, we're quite willing to clarify anything you want to talk about.
Okay. Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, thank you. From the statement of comprehensive income, I read that the lambing was really good. You had a couple of thousand more lambs and the weight of the lambs was really good. So that, as an interpretation from that, was going to be quite a profitable year. And the revenue was up 3.5 million, but then the cost of sales was up 3.4 million, you know, so it kind of wiped that out. I just wondered why there wasn't, why the cost of sales went up so much when a lot of the gains were from just having a really good year.
I think you need to split it, looking at the results for the TFL farm, you need to split it between the farm and forestry. And, excuse me.
Sure, do you want me to speak on that? Because, sorry, she's got a cold.
I'm going to fade, but I'll jump in
yeah.
if I can.
Part of that is forestry as well as farming, and that's joined into it. So the cost of sales is the cost of harvest as well, and in that cost of harvest is you've got your gross figure and your cost of those sales. So that's all included in it as well. Okay.
One clarity, is that also the cost of constructing the road to enable you to harvest?
It's
not the road, but there is still a lot of additional work in the cost of sales in terms of the fence. You know, you're moving fences, you're looking, because we're working within a operating farm as well. So there is a lot around the fencing on the for the forestry blocks, but it doesn't, the road and construction is separate. But there's a lot of upfront work.
You would have budgeted that sort of stuff, though the budget's way below that.
Yeah, and I think there's the SOI, this is all comparing to our SOI budget, which is done quite a lot in advance. It's a high level budget. We do very detailed budgeting before the year begins. Like any, you know, so we're in that quasi world, whereas a commercial enterprise, you do budget what, you know, towards the end of the financial year. We're doing the SOI for a 3-year period well early. So in our results within the Act, we have to compare it against our SOI. So we don't always at that point know what the, you know, your year-end outturn is going to look like, because you're only halfway through the financial year, and especially on the farm, that's quite difficult to predict.
Okay, I just had a question around the property holdings. I was surprised that, you know, you budgeted for 2.876 and you didn't achieve that. In fact, it was a little bit less than the previous year, which I thought would have been a very predictable area that you would achieve exactly on, well, not exactly, but somewhere around budget. Is there an explanation for that one?
There's 2 reasons for that. I mean, sorry, I'll do my best. Not that well. The SOI, when it was done, I mean, in that year, there was a lot of movements regarding the temporary accommodation, the Fitzherbert building. So some of the assumptions in the SOI around that space were incorrect. The other big factor that was a driver is that in the 2018 year, there was a change in the accounting, in the sense that we have stripped out the interdivisional, because property, we work on divisions, so property charges rent to the holiday park and to the testing station.
Oh, okay.
That has always been factored in the gross numbers.
Yeah.
This year we actually did a switch, so we, you know, looking at it going, which we should have actually netted that, taken out that impact, and so the impact is property has reduced revenue, but the other 2 divisions have reduced costs. So that equates, that's about 300,000. So if you put that, take that into account, property is up on prior year. I mean, it still has a variance to the SOI, but it's that is because
Okay.
just the assumptions in the SOI were incorrect.
Councillor Dowsing?
Thank you. I'm just going back to the TFL cost of sales. Last year, the report had forestry separated out, and it was much easier to follow. And we had made a request last year to ensure that we could identify different areas of business and see performance. And this report seems to be a step in the other direction. If forestry has now been included into the farming operation. So I'm wondering if we're going to be able to see that at some stage, the breakdown of performance across the two areas?
Yeah, I think there's 2 points. We did signal when we discussed the SOI last time that we needed to change, and I think it's recognised we need to do a lot of work on the SOI to make sure what metrics we've got in there is what's required to be seen, with the proviso that we need to be a little bit careful around some of the commercial sensitivity, but it doesn't mean we can't provide a lot more detail than is currently there.
Supplementary, commercial sensitivity aside, this is, it's just reporting and we need to do that. And but last year, specifically, it was separated out. This year, it's not.
Yeah.
And last year, we asked for more separation during the delivery of this report. Of the annual report last year. So I'm just,
Okay, I wasn't around the annual report last year, so I can't talk to that. I can only talk about what had been discussed at the SOI. And yes, we are looking at doing greater ability to do more divisional reporting. I think we also need to acknowledge at the same time that GHL is greater than just the sum of the parts. There's a lot of relationships between the divisions. So while we will look to do some of that analysis for you, so you've got greater visibility, it will never be honest that those divisions operate as a collective. So we need to just balance that out. But there will be, going forward, a lot greater.
So just supplementary again to that then, that's fine, but we are paid in our subvention payments and distributions based on that exact separation of forestry from operations. So for me, it's fundamental in terms of our monitoring of performance that we have the separation of at least those two things. So it makes no sense to lump them together for me.
No, that's fine, and we'll take that on board and change it.
And Shannon, that is part of the whole thing that we're making sure now that everything is included in the forestry side of it. All the costs included are with the forestry side of it. Up until we've actually started harvesting, all the costs have been absorbed by the farm, if you understand, up until the cost of harvest. And we're trying to be really clear on that all those costs from now on are actually attributed to forestry. So any of the fencing that's done, the tracking involved to get these machines in there, the rehabilitation work that's been having to be done is all attributed to the cost of sales. And that's where you can actually see a lot of those rises. Whereas before, all that fencing that was happening and what was just was being paid for by the farming side of it. So we're trying to make sure that, and it's a work in progress with Olsen's, with our forest managers, because it becomes a different setup than what they've traditionally worked under, trying to make sure that we do get that true alignment to the cost of sales for the forestry side of it. So it is a work in progress, and we'll work with it, but we're more than welcome to any time to come to the office and sit down and go through the granulars of it as much as you want.
And I think that's part of bringing finance in-house, so we can control the reporting. We can actually get these systems embedded now so we can report with what's required. I think there's always been a little bit of a difficulty when you're using external to really drive the granularity that we've needed. But appreciate we have kind of gone backwards this year a little bit in terms of TFL.
Robert.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I think the result has been partially dependent on revaluation of assets, which is fine. We've been operating in a year when there have been good commodity prices, both for forestry and for stock. My question is about how do you see your resilience in the future should there be a downturn?
Our resilience, look, I think we're on a pretty good path. We've got the farm in a reasonable state up there. There has been some deferred maintenance over the years that we are trying to make a catch up, and especially one of those areas is housing for staff. You'll see over the next last year and this year going forward, there's going to be quite an increase in that because of the staffing level, and we're adamant that our asset needs to be maintained. Another area is the fencing, the upgrades to the fencing. So we spent a lot of money from 3 years ago on capital fertiliser, which now we're in the process of actually coming back to maintenance fertiliser because we actually spent that capital money previously. The focus now is on the housing side of it and the fencing side of it, and splitting that side of it out to what goes into forestry. Look, I feel the farm's in a very good state, and you'll notice that the increase, and we talked about the valuations, the increase in the valuations this year is a lot less than what it was last year, about 500k off the top of my head. So last year there was a big increase in the standard values of stock, and this year compared to last year, it's not, because the stock prices have been pretty consistent. We don't know what that's going to be next year. It may be a decrease. We can't. That's out of our hands. That's set through the standard value system.
Yeah, and I think that point though is well taken. That if you take the revaluation out of 7.688 million off the bottom line, well, the result is a lot thinner. But and that's why we can't be complacent. I mean, there still would be a surplus, and you'd still be able to pay your dividend or subvention payment to council. But it shows, in the farming community, it can change, and all you can do is work efficiently and hope that that doesn't happen.
Can I just make 2 points on that? I mean, first, coming back to your resilience point, I think you need to look at GHL once again as a sum of the parts, and we're investing in the holiday park to increase, making sure we can take advantage of the increased tourism numbers, people that we know are looking for accommodation. We're looking at other investments to grow, so we're not going to be totally dependent on the farm. The other thing is our distribution is based on the cash. So we can talk about revaluations, and I mean, we're a commercial business. We want to increase our balance sheet and our distribution, and I think it's clear we are doing both. If the revaluations next year didn't work in our favour, I mean, we're still growing. There's still, whether it's stock might be down, but you might find property is up. It's a big unknown, but at the end of the day, we are still driving and growing that distribution, and that's based on cash, irrespective of what the valuations do. So I think that kind of just deflects from, you can take that out, but as a commercial business, valuation is a huge part of it. We're in that world. We're not just looking at the cash basis. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, that's a good question. With your total debt to equity being at 9.9% compared to the budget of 20%, is that going to increase much with your development that's happening at the holiday park at the moment?
Yeah, so up until June just gone, we didn't actually have to, at the moment, we don't even have a mortgage over any of our facilities. We've just got a general bank facility. So we have been able to, through property division and others, we've been able to actually cash flow fund a lot of the development thus far ourselves. So even on the Fitzherbert building, we didn't actually have to draw down everything in cash. We will over the next, because now we're at that point, while we didn't draw it down for Fitzherbert, we will be having to draw down for extra borrowings for Waikanae Holiday Park, potentially for some of the farm, maintenance that we need to do in terms of housing up on TFL. But we've got a huge headroom, so I don't, we'd be nowhere near, even with what's already in the pipeline, we come nowhere near to hitting that 20% limit that is in our SOI, and we still have room to do other development, before we even have to come back to council to say, hey, if we had some other big business case that we wanted to potentially move that, we certainly would. But at this stage, based on what's in the pipeline and the investment opportunities we're looking at, we don't even come close to that maximum.
Councillor Thompson.
Just in reference to the previous question with separating the budgets. And was the forestry a separate company? Wasn't there Te Awhiri Parry Forestry Limited as against Te Awhiri Parry?
There was originally, but it had never been used as a separate, because all the costs over the years to do with forestry have been just paid through Te Awhiri Parry Farms.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it actually never been used, and it was
just an empty
it was an
company
empty
that's been
company
wound
that
up.
had never been used. So all of the value of the forest today, the actual farmer paid for it, and funded it. So to have another company and another just seemed like a silly thing to do. So that's why it'll basically try and move it to a division of GHL rather than a. It's the same as what property is as well, so that all the costs can be attributed to that division.
No, that's fine. I just, yeah,
I
had it in
you're
my
right,
mind
it had been,
that
but
there
it
was
actually
another
never been
company
used
involved, and
because
that's
none
right.
of the cost of getting that forestry to the point of harvest had been done.
But I think it's important what Shannon and Councillor Dowsing is saying is, I think we'd like to see that, otherwise transparency and, and we get questioned and that, and it's just a clarity thing so that there's
and you did right, and that's what we want to do as well. We want to make sure that every cost attributed to that division is within that division, and so we can actually show a true path of what it's actually returning.
Councillor Arkell-Brown.
Yeah, just following on from that then, I note in your reports discussions around how well Waikanae, the park's doing, which is evidence for seeing all the people there. But do we talk a bit about Churchill Park and how well that's managed, or is that a separate entity managed in its own space? Because I have seen it be used, in a social aspect, and very appreciative of that. But are they separated as entities as well?
No, Churchill Park is reported under the holiday park, so we have the same manager runs both. I think it's one area that we've just sort of looked at to see, is there something more we can do, and have that discussion. We haven't got there yet to have that discussion with council, because I think at the moment it feels to me it's only used as a overflow, or if there's a big group that needs access to, with the buildings there and the way it's set up. And it's just saying, well, can we do something more with that? What can we do with the current licence agreement? That's coming, it's just things we haven't actually come to council, but it's something that's on the list to really review, because I think that's sort of something we're missing as a trick, or, we could be doing more with it.
A supplementary, Mr. Chair. I just in that space then, I was wondering, because I do know, and I'm grateful for them supporting people that have found themselves homeless, that social space with social housing, is that something that the discussion around Churchill that could come into that space, or is that just ad hoc really, eh?
We hadn't looked at that. I mean, certainly the way, we've looked at the holiday park, we believe that's a holiday park, that's what it's there for, not for the social space. Whether that's a discussion we want to have with council, and if they want us to, explore those options with Churchill Park, that's something we can certainly.
Yeah, just through the chair, just to clarify for Councillor Arkell-Brown, Churchill Park is on reserved land, so we actually don't own it, so we're administering it on behalf of the Crown. And there are significant iwi interests in that area, so we will be limited in terms of what we can actually do.
Thank you.
Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. I just wanted to quickly return to the staff report on the financial performance and measures, page 56, and just ask, there is an assumption in there, investment property up 16.5 million with 12.9 million in additions, and it's unclear if this is the Turbot Street rebuild or if there's additional assets included. Is that for Turbot Street, or are there additional assets included?
Okay, there are, hang on, just let me, sorry.
Number 16, sorry.
Well, there are some other assets in there. I mean, the Fitzherbert building was a total cost of 12.8 million.
Okay. Thank you. And then the next, just the performance indicators show all targets were achieved, but this is obviously high due to revaluations. Do you believe we should be adjusting those targets to accommodate for revaluations, or should we be eliminating revaluations so that we have performance measures that are applicable? And are you happy with the overall performance when it is, when they are removed of being just under the targeted performance measures?
Well, there's two. I believe being a commercial enterprise, revaluations are a huge part of it. You can't exclude them. It doesn't, in my mind anyway, from any commercial, it doesn't make sense.
Oh, it's 4.1, sorry, yeah.
But that can only be a proxy because the assumption, you know, the equity still shows all the revaluations from prior years included in that number. So that calculation in itself, in my mind, doesn't actually show you anything, doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah, so my question was...
It doesn't really work to me from a commercial enterprise, it doesn't make sense.
So my question was, are the measures that we have applicable? Should we be changing them, or should we be looking at it with figures excluded? What's your belief on how we should measure? And are you happy with the performance in general?
I think we need to review the metrics within the SOI. I believe they should be including evaluation. Of course, that's always going to be quite subjective, you know, because how do you set that? Because they could, you know, at the moment they're going up. We could be in a position very soon that, you know, if stock numbers or stock unit prices went down, or even property values. So I know that is a slightly mixed, but I think we need to do some work around what is the best metrics to be using for this. I'm not convinced the ones that are in our SOI at the moment are the most appropriate.
Yeah, I'd agree, just because obviously those fluctuations mean that a percentage base we put in place is very difficult to judge against. And I wouldn't unfairly judge you if you didn't meet target one year because the valuations went down. I would, however, if they go through the roof, I'm not going to say amazing work because it's a revaluation. Yeah. So yeah, for me, the measures need to change.
Yeah. So that's what I think as part of, you know, unfortunately, we've already set the 2018. I think when we revisit this with you and early in the new year, that's when we need to look at these and say, hang on, 2 years, you know, we've had GHL in its current form is now 2 years in. What are those better, you know, we need to be looking at better metrics because I personally don't think the ones that are in there are the right ones.
Thank you.
Councillor Foster.
Yeah, just another question. With the debt to equity, do you see your 20% budget as fulfilling as a good limit to fulfil your future aspirations, or is that going to be restrictive? Bearing in mind the cost of borrowing at the moment is and looks like it's going to be quite cheap for a while, but yeah.
I personally don't think we've ever seen it as yes, it's a limit within our SOI. And I could be completely wrong, so please don't shoot me. But my understanding was that if we had a really good business case, or if the council, you know, there was something we were working with you, that we could say, hey, this makes sense, let's do it. You know, if that 20% was going to be the limiting factor, then that's a discussion we would need to have. I don't think it's never stopped our thought process to say that's the barrier. I think we've always thought if that becomes a barrier and there's a good reason why we'd want to, you know, take it up, we would have to come back and have that honest discussion with
And I think it's been talked about like previous years that if there was a case for that, then you know, we need to look at it. But we, you know, you want to work conservatively. You don't want to have us spending money willy-nilly. You know, so I think we need to look at the individual cases. We have got things in place like with the holiday park that's a predicted spend over X number of years that's going to take it to there. You know, we've had a lot of capital work up with forestry, and there's still a lot more to go. With 7.7 kilometres of roading that needs to be done, and if you're all aware, that's not a cheap thing to do. We're talking $120,000 a kilometre. So that's capital roading for the harvest over the next few years. So there's quite a lot of that and other projects we're looking at to do. So we're well aware it's going to increase, and if we get to a point where we need to come have that conversation, we'll come have that conversation on an individual basis.
Yeah, fair enough. Councillor Seymour.
Thanks very much for the report. I think that's really helpful and healthy. But I'd just like to, and it's more for public consumption. Do you think at some point we could have a report on what the total cost of our rural was, what the lease costs of the premises were that you met for the time that we were out of the building? And because we just noted in our own report, there's a sum of money for a cost that council has met. And I don't think we've ever, and it would probably be something the holding company and GDC put together. So we have a total package of what this exercise really cost, because we don't have that. So if you could do that sometime, that would be in conjunction.
The total cost of what GHL met, including, you know, moving everyone out, the leasehold improvements, leasing the buildings, moving everyone back in and all of that. I mean, and demolishing rebuild was 13.4 million in total.
How many?
13.4.
Thank you.
And the building, as said, was 12.8 and its value is 15 million.
Okay.
And the leases while they were there?
That should be all, need to double check, I think that's all part of the 7.4.
Thank you.
Councillor Burdett.
And again, I mean, it would be good to see it all on a page and what the current valuation for this building is now that it's completed. 15. I couldn't quite hear that.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Councillor Burdett.
Forestry, the cost that you identified, and get a true picture, and in relation to that, the carbon credits and what role that plays in terms of the next 15 to 20 years. You've sold some, you've got tax to pay on some, you've replanted. We really don't have a clear picture in terms of that forestry and the ongoing income stream for quite some time.
Well, that's part of what we're currently doing, because we're just paid for some of the first replanting, and we've got another bill there now, but we're going through today for the next part of this year's planting. So it's bringing that's the start of bringing all these costs, true costs, into, because it's all right saying we've sold X amount of trees to the port, but once you start taking out all the costs,
yes, that's where I'm coming from.
So look, this is it's been difficult up till now because it's just been absorbed through the farm. Like, we get a bill for pruning, we get a bill for planting, for pest management. Those have all been absorbed by the farm. So there's a huge cost for the farming business over the years, which is basically cash going out, that you can't keep doing that. It's got to be attributed to the forest. And unfortunately, because that's never been done, because the actual forestry hasn't had any money in its own right to do it, it's been so to turn around now and say, unfortunately, guys, and this is being really honest, there's gross figures spouted around about forestry, and it's a pretty scary thing once you actually get into the nuts and bolts of it. So be prepared, because that's the reality of it. But we want to be really clear and make sure that all these costs are actually attributed, because the farm can't keep absorbing it. You know, you say we sold carbon credits, and the reason we sold carbon credits was so we could actually have the money to upgrade these houses on the farm, and that probably has been a reason, because all the forestry over the years, all those forestry costs have been maybe holding back the maintenance of your actual farm building. So we need to make sure it's moved over and accounted for in a way that we can.
But can I just say in defence of that, that's exactly how every other pastoral farmer with forestry blocks operates, because you don't have any income till you sell the trees. So you have to either bankroll it from your bank, or you bankroll it from the sale of some carbon credits, which you will grow in the volume of trees that you've got, or you bankroll it out of your pastoral farming operation. So I just want to make it clear that TFL have not done anything different to what anyone else would have done, because there isn't any income till the
that's probably a good point, and that's also trying to manage the whole cash flow across the whole business. There is a big part of biggest part of our farm income comes in from Christmas till the end of the year, next to none from June till Christmas. Whereas some of the other divisions can help with that, and then there's a swing over. So it's keeping the finance costs down over the whole division, and it's proven that when we built this building, we didn't have to draw down the money, which saved us a lot of financing costs across the business.
Just a supplementary.
Last one, Councillor.
Yeah, just supplementary to the carbon credits discussion. It seems like maybe an odd way to finance, because you only retain 25% of that. It's so the majority of that goes straight to our distribution. So it doesn't seem like it seems like a big risk for return sort of thing. Well, not risk, but it seems like a small return on the sales for you guys to be bankrolling renovations.
Yeah, but we only used we did a big thesis on it with Olsen's and Rotorua on. We only used the safe carbon element of the forest, and because of our forest profile, we've got them from trees this high to harvest. We've got a very, very good spread of forest, and there's not a lot of people. There's a lot of forests that don't have that spread of age group of forest, and so there's an element of safe carbon that becomes available, because you're never going to be cutting all those trees down over 4 years. So you're only ever going to need to have that in place. So we've actually got a very good spread of our actual age group of forest, which enables us to do that. we've actually got, and just remember, we're always accumulating credits along the way, and we've got a lot of safe carbon credits sitting there at the moment that we could use for a rainy day if we had to, but we've got no plans for that at the moment. So.
Okay, right, thanks very much. I think we'll leave that there. Everyone's had a good go. Thanks very much. It is operating very well, good financial result, and we're very happy that you're looking after our assets so well. And we, of course, always enjoy you to come here, and nice to meet you, Sophie. So I'll move receipt of the report. Second to Councillor Stoltz. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against carried. So you'll just be back a little bit later. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Thanks very much. Now, moving on to the close audit report, and I see that we've got David down there. Would you like to come up, David? Welcome. So we've all had a chance to read your report. Is there anything that you want to add to that, or do you want to just allow discussion and questions?
I might just do it very briefly.
Okay, all right, just push this button on.
That one?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe starting on page 3 of the report on the executive summary, just to give a bit of quick context. We're substantially complete with our audit work, and by that I mean we're finished with our audit work over the underlying numbers, and we're just working through the most recent version of the full annual report document itself. In terms of any audit differences we identified in going through that process, those have all been adjusted for and reflected in the annual report, and those primarily related to service performance measures. In terms of the areas of audit focus that are in the report, I might just briefly touch on 2 of those. Firstly, on the infrastructure assets, which is on page 6 of the report, we completed our usual procedures around infrastructure assets, which are looking to see that additions in the year are in fact capital in nature rather than repairs and maintenance. Also looked at considerations around the useful lives of assets. Another important element of our work was looking at the revaluations in the year. So all classes of infrastructure assets were revalued in the year. For the roading revaluation, that was done externally by a third party, Stantec, and our primary procedures around that was doing some sample testing on the underlying RAM database to get assurance over the descriptions, attributes, lengths of the underlying roads that were being valued. The second part of our work was around looking at the cost inflators that Stantec had applied in carrying out that valuation, and we effectively agreed those through to third-party cost inflators. For the water infrastructure assets, those were revalued internally by the council management team. But again, our procedures were reasonably similar in terms of first we started by validating the underlying information about the length and quality of pipe in the IPS8 system. And then secondly, we looked at the cost inflator that had been applied to effectively affect that valuation and agreed that to supporting records from Statistics New Zealand.
Before we move on from that, David, can I just ask a question around that? Yes, we were talking about the depreciation, and you examined the appropriateness of the depreciation levels. So the question was, you didn't say whether we were using the appropriate one, but I guess you are saying that. But have we changed the depreciation rates over the years, and the information we've been gathering on our assets, is that having an effect on how we depreciate them?
In short, yes. So and this, I guess, relates more so to the pipe networks rather than roading, because they're underground and it's difficult to understand the quality. As council carries out maintenance and things like that during the year, it allows council to build up a better knowledge of the pipes that come out of the ground. What sort of quality are they? What's their remaining useful life? And the short answer to your question is yes, based on that kind of evidence, the useful lives are revisited and updated accordingly.
Yeah, what I actually was really wondering is whether we're extending the life of our assets and therefore depreciating them slower, or finding they're in worse condition and doing quicker.
It can be either of those two. It depends on.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, you carry on.
And I'll only touch on one other point in the report, and that is on page 11, and it's to do with the service performance reporting. So just confirming our work around that, as we effectively pick some of those performance measures on a sample basis and agree them through to supporting data and recalculate those measures. We identified some reasonably minor discrepancies in doing that, and we have reported that in the audit difference section of our report, and those have all been corrected for. And I guess the flow-on piece from that is just around some process improvement opportunities, where we'll work to with management to see if those processes can effectively be made less manual, or maybe where they can't be made less manual, there might be the opportunity for peer review of certain items. That's all I wanted to touch on in the report, but happy to take questions on any.
Yeah, I've got another question of a more general nature. As you know, all councils around the country don't deliver fully their capital works programs, usually about 70%. So, I mean, you would think that if you'd worked out your capital works program accurately as to what needs to be renewed and replaced and all the rest of it, well, everything would tick along nicely. You're doing 100% of it, and you can be assured that your infrastructure is going to be in a good state. But if you're actually only doing 70% for a number of years in a row, you would assume that you would be well behind and your infrastructure is getting into a worse state. So what's your opinion around that?
Yeah, so that's a fair point. I think there's a piece of work that's been done by the OAG, and it effectively looks at the percentage you were talking about averaged across all councils, and it is about 70 or 80% in terms of when you look at renewals versus the depreciation on the related assets, and you'd think that they would be equal if you're effectively replacing an asset evenly over time. And the key question that's asked in those circumstances where the percentage is below 100 is, are you creating sort of a bow wave of maintenance or renewals work that you're going to have to complete in the future? Or is it more that the estimated lives of those assets haven't been estimated correctly? Okay. And it's often an area of focus for councils and trying to work through that, because it's not a black and white thing. It involves a lot of estimate. But the concern is the lower that percentage is, potentially the further behind a council is falling in there.
Councillor Stolz.
Thank you for a very easy to read audit report. Last night when I read it, I take you to page 30, and it's just a question out of interest where you report 4 areas there where you looked at activity and performance measures that were then adjusted. The question I have, did you check all of our activity and performance measures, or do you take the odd sample and check them for discrepancies? Because I was just interested, did you check every one and these were the ones you picked up, or do you just do samples everywhere and then take a look?
We do it on a sample basis, but in saying that, I think an important point that I should clarify is it's not a completely random sample across all of the measures. We focus quite heavily on infrastructure related measures, so roading and the 3 waters being those are the primary services that council delivers to the community, and then our sampling would be a little bit more sparse across the other areas.
Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, I've asked this question in a few forums, but it's good to have an auditor here. We've got a significant portfolio of community housing which we depreciate, and that's kind of the difference between it making a few bucks and being quite a bit more profitable if we didn't have to depreciate it. If we were to take a call that it's something that we wouldn't replace, you know, it might not be something here, we might put it to another entity. Do we have to depreciate the community housing? I mean, in the private sector, you don't depreciate anymore because it's actually an appreciating asset. Do you know the rules around that?
So from an accounting perspective, the quick answer is no, you're not. You're required to depreciate the housing over its useful life, but I think the key question is, do you need to rate fund that depreciation? And the answer to that is that that's a council choice around whether that depreciation is funded through rates, and if you do that, that rate funding allows you to then replace the asset at the end of its useful life. And if council was to take a decision that they were going to use that housing till the point it was dilapidated and then have no further use for it after that, that would be a good reason to not rate fund that depreciation. You would still have the depreciation, which would draw the value of the asset down to nil, but it just wouldn't be a cost that the community would bear, if that makes sense, because you're not rate funding the depreciation.
Who determines useful life? Is that our call?
Council does, and it would be council's management team, engineers, whoever has the relevant knowledge. And we're required to have a look at that and say it's within the bounds of reasonableness, but it's a judgment, right? It can be difficult to determine precisely what a useful life is.
Right, Councillor Seymour.
I just want to thank you very much for the report. That's really helpful. But if we look at those non-chief, we should imagine we were concerned that with respect to our flood control stop bank needs, and this is page 13, that only 6.8% of our flood control scheme has been checked, if you like, when we've actually said we will monitor 25%. So we should be looking at that and doing protection in our infrastructure report. Because that's quite significant. And in the last box, under the percentage, that should be noted the report that we're trying to get rather than the support. Because I suspect to get a report on that. In the last box, about the percentage of your report compliance under the reasons.
Yeah. Yes, you could call it a report. I suspect what that is, it'll be a data dump of all the inspections that have been carried out and the results of those.
And then if we go to the very last page, 23, is that telling me that there's no dollar sign, but I presume no fees, so we think about 100,000 on the bill?
That is reporting that we're required to include. So we're required to disclose to council any other services we've provided over and above the audit of the annual report, because in certain circumstances that can be seen to bear on our independence effectively if we're selling other services. That relates to the audit of the long-term plan and the associated consultation document.
And the statement of service performance is 178,000 in the last chapter.
That's for the full annual report for the 17. Yeah. No problem.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Just for, can I ask one supplementary on
Sure.
page 7, Mr. Chairman, and it just because we've touched on affordability earlier in the meeting, and page 7 is the integrity of the rate strike, rates, invoicing and collection. And you've given a perspective, but so you don't actually tell us what you think. Like we're saying, we understand that certain rate paying groups represent a significant collection risk. You've examined them for doubtful debts and considered whether it's appropriate in the circumstances. Are you in a position at some point to give us some advice around that? Because it doesn't actually tell me whether it's yes, it is considered to be appropriate, or no, it's not.
So I can clarify that by saying that we're satisfied the provision for doubtful debts is appropriate. So there are particular elements of the rates where it's effectively more difficult to collect them. And as a result of that, if you look at the percentage that council recognises as a provision against those receivables, it's significantly higher for those rates than for other rates. And we've looked at that and we're satisfied that percentage is sufficient.
So we should take all those things to, sorry, excuse me.
No, I was going to ask exactly.
So we should take that to mean you did perform the following tests and you're generally happy, and that's what you're really saying to us. So
Yes.
it leaves a question mark for us as we read it. Thank you.
Yeah, fair point.
Okay, yeah, David's going to come back into the closed section in case there are matters that are sensitive or commercially sensitive. So I believe that's the normal procedure. So David, that's very good. Thank you. Somebody move the receipt of the report. Councillor Seymour and Stoltz. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Okay, right, thank you. So we're going to move into closed meeting now. I'll move that the public be excluded. Second, Councillor Burdett. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. So we're just going to invite Gisborne Holdings back in. If they're there.
Right. Just do you think in the future we should be able to bring people in by
Helicopter.
teleconference?
Oh, teleconference.
We tried for the
He was here anyhow, wasn't he?
we tried that for the early one
that's
in
right.
April, and we failed.
Oh, that shouldn't be a reason, though. We should just get ourselves sorted out.
Yeah, we've had a lot of months since April.
Oh, I know.
And, no, a good point. Are we still live on this?
Yes, we are.
Well, somebody better turn it off.